The Birth of Rome, a Mythic Beginning, 753 BCE. The birth of Rome is a tale of myth and legend, wrapped in the veils of ancient history, one that has been passed down for centuries. It is a story steeped in divine intervention, fateful decisions, and the triumph of human will against all odds. Rome, often seen as the cornerstone of Western civilization, began its journey not as a grand empire, but as a humble city founded in the heart of the Italian peninsula, on the banks of the Tiber River. According to legend, the story of Rome's founding begins long before 753 BCE, during a time when gods, kings, and heroes walked among men, and the very fabric of reality was intertwined with the divine. The mythic birth of Rome is not just the foundation of a city, but the beginning of a civilization that would go on to shape the world for millennia. At the heart of Rome's origin is the story of its twin founders, Romulus and Remus. These brothers, born of the Vestal Virgin Rhea Silvia and the god Mars, were destined for greatness from the moment of their conception. Their birth was no ordinary event. The circumstances surrounding it were fraught with divine intervention and celestial omens. Rhea Silvia's father, the king of Alba Longa, had been overthrown by his brother Romulus. Fearing the possibility of a rival claimant to the throne, Romulus forced his niece Rhea to become a Vestal Virgin, swearing an oath of chastity. Yet as fate would have it, the god Mars, drawn to the beauty of the Vestal, took her as his lover. When Rhea gave birth to twins, Romulus, enraged by the betrayal and fearful of the threat the children posed, ordered that the babies be cast into the Tiber River. The river, however, refused to claim them. Instead, the twins were carried along its waters until they came ashore at the base of the Palatine Hill. It was there, in a secluded cave called the Lupercal, that the twins were discovered by a she-wolf, who, moved by maternal instincts, nurtured and cared for them. The she-wolf, known as Lupa, suckled the infants, providing them with the sustenance needed to survive in the wild. The twins grew strong and healthy under the watchful care of Lupa and the occasional visits from a shepherd named Faustulus, who, with his wife Acca Larentia, raised the boys as their own. This humble upbringing, far from the royal courts they had been born into, would shape Romulus and Remus into fierce, resourceful, and determined men. They grew to be natural leaders, admired by the people around them, and renowned for their bravery and strength. As they reached adulthood, Romulus and Remus began to realize their true heritage. The twins returned to Alba Longa, where they confronted King Romulus. With their innate sense of justice and the help of their followers, they overthrew the tyrant and restored their grandfather, King Numitor, to the throne. This victory marked the beginning of their legacy, but it also planted the seeds of an even greater destiny. The twins, driven by the desire to found their own city, left Alba Longa behind and set out to establish a settlement of their own. Their journey led them to the fertile land along the Tiber River, where they chose the site that would eventually become Rome. The decision of where to establish their city was not an easy one, and it was here that a fateful rivalry began. Romulus and Remus, as twin brothers, each had their own vision for the city. They disagreed on which hill would be the best place to build. Romulus favored the Palatine Hill, which offered a commanding view of the surrounding area and was easily defensible. Remus, on the other hand, preferred the Aventine Hill, which was rich in resources and more accessible. To settle the dispute, the brothers agreed to leave the decision to the gods, each seeking a divine omen to guide them. They chose to interpret the omens through augury, a practice in which the flight patterns of birds were seen as messages from the gods. The augury was performed, and Romulus was the first to receive a favorable omen, witnessing 12 vultures, while Remus saw only 6. This sign, interpreted as a divine endorsement of Romulus's vision, led him to declare the Palatine Hill as the chosen site for the new city. However, Remus, ever defiant, scoffed at his brother's interpretation of the omen. In a moment of mockery, he leaped over Romulus's newly constructed boundary wall, a gesture that was seen as an insult to Romulus's authority. Enraged by the disrespect, Romulus struck his brother down, killing him. This tragic event marked the first bloodshed in the history of Rome, setting the tone for the city's future, a city built on both noble ideals and harsh realities. Romulus, now the sole ruler, went on to establish the foundations of the city, naming it after himself, Rome. The birth of Rome, however, was not without its challenges. In the early days of the city's existence, Romulus faced the problem of populating his fledgling settlement. The city, though strategically located, was small and lacked the resources and manpower to sustain itself. Romulus, a pragmatist and a leader of action, came up with a bold solution. He invited neighboring peoples to a grand festival, one that would lure them into the city with promises of entertainment and diversion. As the festival unfolded, Romulus ordered his men to abduct the daughters of the neighboring Sabines, an act that would come to be known as the Rape of the Sabine Women. This daring and controversial act, though born of necessity, would prove to be one of the most defining moments in the early history of Rome. The abduction of the Sabine women sparked outrage and war, as the Sabines retaliated with an army that marched on Rome. However, the Roman women, who had by now become wives and mothers in Rome, intervened, pleading with their Sabine fathers and brothers to stop the violence and end the conflict. Their emotional appeal was successful, and the two sides agreed to a truce, eventually merging the Sabines and the Romans into one unified people. This act of unity would be remembered as a symbol of Rome's ability to overcome internal and external strife through diplomacy and determination. Under Romulus's leadership, the city of Rome grew steadily in both size and influence. Romulus established the Roman Senate, an advisory body made up of the city's elders, and created the Roman legions, the military force that would later become the backbone of the Roman Empire. He also introduced important social and religious practices that would define Roman life for centuries to come. Romulus ruled until his death, which, according to legend, occurred when he mysteriously vanished during a storm. The people of Rome, grieving the loss of their founder, believed that Romulus had been taken up into the heavens, where he was transformed into the god Quirinus. The birth of Rome, in mythic terms, is the story of a city founded by gods and heroes, a place where divine favor and human determination collided to create the greatest empire the world had ever known. This legendary beginning laid the groundwork for Rome's future as a center of power, culture, and influence that would endure for over a millennium. From the humble, blood-soaked birth on the banks of the Tiber River to the rise of one of history's most formidable civilizations, the mythic tale of Rome's foundation serves as a reminder of the power of destiny, divine will, and human resilience in shaping the course of history. As the years passed, Rome grew into a formidable force, but its early years were still marked by struggles and the constant challenge of securing its survival and expansion. Romulus's reign, although transformative, was only the beginning of a long and tumultuous journey for the Roman people. After his mysterious disappearance, the leadership of Rome passed to a series of kings, each one playing a crucial role in the development of the city and its institutions. Following Romulus, the next king was Numa Pompilius, who focused on the spiritual and religious foundations of Rome. Numa is often credited with establishing many of the city's religious rituals and institutions, such as the creation of the Roman calendar and the establishment of the priesthoods. His reign was marked by peace and stability, a stark contrast to Romulus's more martial rule. Numa's reign showed the Romans that their city was not only built on military might, but also on a strong moral and spiritual foundation, which would be crucial in the city's growth and unity. Following Numa, the monarchy of Rome saw periods of prosperity as well as upheaval, with leaders like Tullus Hostilius, who sought to expand Roman influence through war, and Ancus Marcius, who focused on infrastructure and establishing colonies to further strengthen Rome's reach. Under their leadership, Rome began to extend its control over neighboring regions, turning what was once a small settlement into a powerful city-state. Despite these advances, the Roman monarchy was not to last forever. In 509 BCE, after a series of kings, the last of whom, Tarquinius Superbus, was overthrown, the Romans decided that monarchy was no longer the path they wished to follow. This marked the transition from a kingdom to a republic, a pivotal moment in Roman history. The overthrow of the monarchy and the establishment of the Roman Republic was not just a political change. It was a moment that defined Rome's identity as a city of the people, governed by laws, ideals, and shared ambitions. Thus, the mythic beginnings of Rome in 753 BCE, rooted in divine fate and human conflict, laid the foundation for a civilization that would rise to unprecedented heights. From its humble and mythic origins, Rome would grow into the heart of an empire that would influence the course of history for centuries. Its rise was a testament to the resilience of its people and the continuing power of its founding myths, which reminded them of their humble yet divine origin. The legacy of Romulus and Remus, of the bloodshed and sacrifices that shaped their city, would continue to resonate in the very soul of Rome for centuries to come. Romulus and Remus, the founding of the Eternal City. The story of Romulus and Remus, the legendary twins who are said to have founded Rome, is one of the most iconic and enduring myths of ancient Rome. Their tale is woven into the fabric of the city's origins, providing a narrative that intertwines themes of fate, violence, and divine intervention. The myth of Romulus and Remus, however, is not just a story about the birth of a city. It is a tale that echoes the profound Roman values of honor, strength, and the will to conquer destiny. According to the myth, Romulus and Remus were the sons of Rhea Silvia, a Vestal virgin, and Mars, the god of war. Their birth was, in itself, a significant event, one marked by divine prophecy and royal intrigue. Rhea Silvia, the daughter of Numitor, the king of Alba Longa, had been forced into the role of a Vestal virgin by her uncle, Amulius, who had seized the throne from her father. Amulius, fearing that Rhea Silvia's children might one day seek to reclaim the throne, ordered that she remain celibate. However, Mars, the god of war, visited her in secret, and she became pregnant with twins. The birth of Romulus and Remus was seen as a sign that the gods had chosen them for a great destiny. Their birth, however, was also a threat to the power of Amulius, who feared that the boys would one day overthrow him. In a ruthless attempt to eliminate the threat, Amulius ordered that the twins be drowned in the Tiber River. The river, however, did not prove to be their grave. Instead, the river carried the infants to safety, and they were washed ashore near the site that would later become the city of Rome. At this point, the myth takes a dramatic turn, as the twins were discovered by a she-wolf, known as Lupa, who nurtured them in her cave, the Lupercal, at the foot of the Palatine Hill. The she-wolf, a symbol of Rome's strength and resilience, suckled the twins, and they were cared for by the she-wolf until they were found by a shepherd named Faustulus. Faustulus, who worked for the king of Alba Longa, brought the boys to his home, where they were raised by him and his wife, Acca Larentia. The twins grew strong, and as they reached maturity, they became known for their remarkable abilities and leadership qualities. The boys' upbringing in the wilderness gave them a deep connection to the land that would later become Rome. As they grew older, Romulus and Remus learned of their true heritage. The discovery of their royal bloodline set the stage for a dramatic confrontation with the usurper Amulius. The twins, fueled by the desire for justice and revenge, led a rebellion against Amulius and his forces. The revolt was successful, and Amulius was overthrown, allowing Numitor, their grandfather, to reclaim the throne of Alba Longa. Having freed their grandfather and restored the rightful ruler to his throne, Romulus and Remus set out on a journey to establish their own city, one that would bear the mark of their greatness and the divine will that had guided their lives. As they traveled, the twins came upon a hill on the banks of the Tiber River, an area that seemed to hold an inherent power. It was here that they decided to build their new city. However, the founding of the city was marred by a bitter dispute between the brothers over which hill should be chosen as the site for the city. Romulus favored the Palatine Hill, while Remus preferred the Aventine Hill. The disagreement escalated, and the brothers sought a divine sign to resolve the conflict. The sign came in the form of birds, with Romulus seeing 12 vultures, while Remus saw only 6. This was interpreted as a sign from the gods that Romulus was favored to become the founder of the city. As the dispute intensified, the brothers engaged in a violent confrontation. Romulus, in a fit of rage and frustration, killed Remus, thereby ending the argument once and for all. Romulus, now alone, began the task of founding the city of Rome. He established the city on the Palatine Hill, the place where he had received the divine sign, and set about constructing walls and buildings. Romulus became the first king of Rome, and he ruled with great authority and vision. He established the first Senate, known as the Senate of the Elders, and he organized the city's first army. His leadership and decisions shaped the early development of Rome, which would go on to become one of the most powerful and influential cities in the world. The founding of Rome was not merely a political act. It was a divine mission that was fulfilled through the actions of Romulus, who was believed to be the son of Mars, the god of war. Romulus embodied the strength, courage, and leadership that the Romans valued, and his story became a symbol of the city's indomitable spirit. The myth of Romulus and Remus, with its themes of fate, violence, and divine will, was a powerful narrative for the Romans. It told the story of the city's humble beginnings and the violent struggle for dominance that characterized its early history. The myth also underscored the importance of the gods in the lives of the Romans, with divine intervention playing a crucial role in shaping the city's fate. The story of the twins' survival against the odds, their rise to power, and the eventual founding of Rome served as a reminder to the Romans that their city was destined for greatness, that it was the product of divine favor and will. Over time, the myth of Romulus and Remus became a symbol of Rome's eternal power and resilience. The story was passed down through generations, and it was retold in various forms, from oral tradition to the written works of poets and historians. The founding of Rome was celebrated in festivals and public rituals, with the Romans honoring their legendary founders as both heroes and gods. Despite the violence and tragedy that marred their story, Romulus and Remus were ultimately seen as the progenitors of the Roman people. Their legacy lived on in the culture and identity of Rome, and the city's founding myth became an integral part of its historical and cultural fabric. The myth also served as a reminder of the Romans' deep connection to their past and their belief in their destiny as rulers of the world. The story of Romulus and Remus is not merely a tale of the founding of a city. It is a story of the values and principles that would define Rome as a civilization. It reflects the Romans' belief in the power of fate, the importance of divine favor, and the necessity of strength and courage in the face of adversity. The myth of Romulus and Remus continues to inspire awe and admiration, as it represents the eternal spirit of Rome, a city that rose from humble beginnings to become one of the greatest empires the world has ever known. The story of Romulus and Remus also carries a deeper moral and symbolic message that resonated with the Romans throughout their history. It emphasizes the importance of sacrifice and the harsh realities of leadership. The tragic death of Remus, though a moment of intense loss for Romulus, symbolized the hard choices that leaders often must make in the pursuit of their destiny. Romulus' decision to kill his brother, though controversial, was seen by some as an act that ensured the survival and future greatness of Rome. This moment in the myth exemplifies the idea that in times of great uncertainty and ambition, personal bonds may have to be broken for the greater good of the state. Another significant element of the story is the role of the she-wolf, Lupa, in the twins' survival. The she-wolf is a symbol of Roman strength, resilience, and maternal care. In the myth, she is not only a life sustainer, but also a symbol of the wild, untamed nature that was eventually tamed and transformed into the greatness of Rome. The image of the she-wolf suckling the twins became one of the most iconic symbols of Roman identity, an emblem of the city's origins and its foundational connection to the natural world. As Romulus established the foundations of the new city, his leadership was crucial in laying the groundwork for Rome's military and political dominance. According to myth, Romulus introduced the practice of kidnapping women from neighboring tribes, most famously the Sabine women, to populate his new city. This controversial act, known as the Rape of the Sabine Women, was depicted as a necessary measure for ensuring the survival of the Roman people. The myth thus weaves together themes of violence, survival, and the forging of a new society from the chaos and conflict of the surrounding world. Romulus also instituted the first Roman Senate, which provided a platform for future governance and political structures that would endure for centuries. His rule was marked by the establishment of the Roman legions, whose disciplined military strategies would later become one of Rome's defining features as it expanded across the known world. Romulus's reign, therefore, set the stage for the city's transformation from a small settlement into a vast empire. The legend of Romulus and Remus also found its place in Roman religious life. The twins were deified after their deaths, and their story was invoked in rituals and religious ceremonies throughout Rome's history. Their tale was not only a reminder of the city's humble beginnings, but also a continuous inspiration for future generations of Romans who saw in their myth the divine approval for the city's rise to power. Rome, built on the foundations laid by Romulus, continued to grow in power, and the city's legacy became immortalized not only in the myth of its founders, but also in the real achievements of the Roman Empire. As Rome's greatness flourished, so too did the story of Romulus and Remus, becoming intertwined with the very identity of the empire itself. Their myth serves as a reminder that greatness is often born from struggle, sacrifice, and the will to overcome the impossible. The early kingdom of Rome, 753 BCE to 509 BCE. The early history of Rome, from its mythical founding in 753 BCE to the establishment of the Roman Republic in 509 BCE, is a tale of transformation, struggle, and the gradual shaping of a civilization that would become one of the most powerful empires in history. This era, known as the early kingdom of Rome, blends legend with historical fact, and it is filled with a series of crucial events and figures that laid the foundation for the grandeur of Rome's future. The story begins with the legendary figure of Romulus, who, along with his twin brother Remus, was said to be raised by a she-wolf and eventually founded the city of Rome. Their birth and subsequent rise to power were steeped in myth, but it marked the beginning of a civilization that would leave an indelible mark on the world. The foundation of Rome, according to tradition, occurred on April 21st, 753 BCE, when Romulus became the first king of the city. This event was the culmination of many centuries of early Italian tribes, including the Latins, who settled on the 7 hills surrounding the Tiber River. These early Romans were influenced by their neighbors, the Etruscans, Greeks, and other Italic peoples. But it was Rome's unique position and its ability to blend these different cultural influences that set it on a path to greatness. The early Romans built a city surrounded by defensive walls, which not only provided physical protection but also symbolized their unity and strength as a fledgling city-state. Romulus, as the first king, played a key role in shaping the early social and political structures of the city. According to legend, he was a charismatic leader who attracted the first settlers to Rome by offering them asylum. This group included many outcasts and individuals who had been rejected from other cities. To bolster Rome's population, Romulus is said to have orchestrated the famous Rape of the Sabine Women, a controversial event that led to the capture of women from the neighboring Sabine tribe to become wives for the Roman men. This event, although steeped in myth, reflects the desperate need for Rome to grow and establish itself in a hostile environment. Over time, the Sabine women became an integral part of Roman society, and their influence is said to have helped solidify the peace between the Romans and the Sabines. Romulus ruled Rome for several decades, during which he focused on the city's military and religious foundations. He established the Roman legions, a military force that would become a central institution in the Roman Empire's future expansion. He also founded key religious practices and institutions, which would later play a significant role in Roman society. His reign, while steeped in legend, helped lay the groundwork for the Roman state's future identity and its relationship with neighboring tribes and nations. After Romulus's mysterious death, which was followed by his sudden and unexplained disappearance, the Roman people chose Numa Pompilius, a wise and pious king, to succeed him. Numa is often credited with shaping the religious and legal foundations of early Rome. Under his leadership, Rome began to develop a more organized society. Numa is said to have introduced important religious rituals and institutions, including the establishment of the priesthoods and the Roman calendar. His focus on religion and laws helped solidify Rome's identity as a city not only of war and conquest, but also of law, order, and tradition. The early kings of Rome, through their combined efforts, began to establish the institutions and structures that would later define the Roman state. These efforts were not always without struggle. The early Roman kings, including Tullus Hostilius and Ancus Marcius, were often engaged in wars and battles to expand their territory and consolidate power. Tullus, known for his militaristic nature, waged numerous wars with neighboring tribes such as the Albans and the Sabines. He is also credited with establishing the Roman Senate, an institution that would grow in power and influence throughout Roman history. Ancus Marcius, on the other hand, focused on expanding Rome's territory, particularly through the establishment of colonies and solidifying its control over the surrounding areas. During his reign, Rome began to extend its borders beyond the city's immediate surroundings, including the founding of the port city of Ostia, which would become a vital part of Rome's commercial infrastructure. Despite these efforts, the early kings of Rome were not without their challenges. The kingdom faced internal struggles, with tensions arising between the aristocratic class and the common people. The plebeians, or commoners, began to demand more rights and recognition, leading to an ongoing struggle for political power within the city. These tensions would later culminate in the overthrow of the monarchy and the establishment of the Roman Republic in 509 BCE. But in the early years of the kingdom, the struggle for political power was often more about establishing Rome's identity and securing its place in the world. The last king of Rome, Tarquin the Proud, is often seen as a tyrant whose reign marked the decline of the monarchy. His leadership was marked by cruelty and excessive pride, and it is said that his actions alienated many of the Roman elite. According to legend, Tarquin's son, Sextus Tarquinius, committed a heinous crime by raping the noblewoman Lucretia, an act that led to a widespread revolt. Lucretia's suicide in response to the crime became a rallying cry for those who opposed the monarchy, and it sparked the final overthrow of the kings. The rebellion led to the establishment of the Roman Republic, marking the end of the early kingdom of Rome and the beginning of a new chapter in the city's history. The overthrow of the monarchy and the establishment of the Roman Republic in 509 BCE was a pivotal moment in the history of Rome. The Roman people, in rejecting the monarchy, sought a new form of government, one that would be based on the principles of shared power and representation. This change was driven by the desire for more political freedom and a response to the tyranny of the kings. The legacy of the early kingdom, however, lived on in the institutions, military traditions, and religious practices that the Romans carried with them into the Republic and later into the Empire. The early kingdom of Rome was a period marked by legendary foundations, early territorial expansion, and the development of political and social institutions. Although it was relatively short-lived, its impact on the history of Rome cannot be understated. The early kings laid the groundwork for the Roman state, blending military might with legal and religious structures that would define the city for centuries to come. It was a time of great myth and historical transformation, a time when Rome took its first steps toward becoming the epicenter of an empire that would span continents and shape the course of history. The lessons learned from the challenges and successes of the early kingdom would echo throughout Rome's history, influencing the rise of its republic, its empire, and its eventual fall. As the monarchy in Rome gave way to the republic, the values, practices, and lessons of the early kingdom continued to shape the new government. The early kings, despite their often authoritarian rule, had left a legacy of strong governance structures, military prowess, and religious institutions that would endure for centuries. The development of the Senate, which began under Romulus and was expanded by later kings like Tullus Hostilius, played a central role in Rome's political life even after the monarchy was abolished. The Senate would later become the cornerstone of Roman governance, evolving into the supreme governing body during the Republic. Additionally, the military traditions established during the kingdom laid the foundation for Rome's legendary legions. The Roman army became an essential institution of the Republic and, later, the Empire, conquering vast territories and ensuring the city's dominance. The organizational techniques, discipline, and tactical innovations pioneered by Rome's early kings were passed down and refined by subsequent generations, allowing Rome to become a military superpower. The religious systems created by the early kings also had long-lasting effects. The priesthoods, festivals, and rituals that were established during the monarchy were carried into the Republic, providing a shared cultural framework that united the Romans. Even the symbols of kingship, such as the scepter and crown, remained in use during the Republic, though they were associated with other figures like consuls rather than monarchs. One of the most significant aspects of the monarchy's legacy was the growing awareness among the Romans of the need for checks on power. The rise of the plebeians and their increasing demand for political rights foreshadowed the later struggles of the Roman Republic, where tensions between the patricians, aristocratic class, and plebeians would continue to evolve. These early experiences of rebellion against absolute rulers would later fuel the Republican ideals of liberty, equality, and shared power. Thus, while the monarchy itself came to an end in 509 BCE, the early Kingdom of Rome left behind a deeply rooted foundation of political, military, and cultural structures that would continue to influence the trajectory of Roman history for centuries to come. The Roman Republic, a government in transition, 509 BCE. The Roman Republic, established in 509 BCE, stands as one of the most influential political systems in human history. It marked the end of the Roman kingdom, a period dominated by monarchs, and ushered in a new era of governance that would lay the foundation for what would later become the Roman Empire. The transition from monarchy to republic was not just a change in leadership, but a profound transformation in how Rome was governed, and the consequences of that transformation would echo through the centuries. At its core, the Roman Republic was a government built on shared power, a delicate balance between the patricians, the aristocratic ruling class, and the plebeians, the common people. The establishment of the Republic was not a smooth or immediate process. It was born out of dissatisfaction with the monarchy, particularly the tyrannical reign of the last Roman king, Tarquinius Superbus. His expulsion in 509 BCE, after the infamous incident of his son's assault on the noblewoman Lucretia, marked the collapse of the monarchy and the dawn of the Republic. The struggle between the patricians and plebeians would become a defining feature of the Republic, leading to a series of political and social reforms aimed at balancing power between these two groups. In the early years of the Republic, power was largely concentrated in the hands of a small group of patricians who held most of the political offices and had control over the military and the government's decision-making. The plebeians, despite being the backbone of Rome's economy and military, had little to no influence in the political process. This imbalance of power led to tensions and frequent conflicts between the two classes. One of the most significant early events in the Republic's history was the creation of the 12 Tables, a set of laws codified in 450 BCE. Prior to this, Roman law was not written down and justice was often arbitrary, subject to the whims of the aristocratic magistrates. The 12 Tables were a major step toward transparency and fairness in Roman governance, as they provided a written record of laws that applied to all citizens, regardless of their social class. This was a key moment in the development of the Republic's legal framework and a cornerstone of Roman law that would influence legal systems in the Western world for centuries to come. Despite this important development, the social divide between the patricians and plebeians remained a critical issue. Over time, the plebeians began to demand more rights and representation, leading to a series of political struggles known as the Conflict of the Orders. This period of social and political upheaval was marked by the plebeians' struggle to gain access to political offices, particularly the consulship, the highest office in the Republic. The plebeians were able to achieve some important victories in this struggle, most notably the creation of the office of the Tribune of the Plebs in 494 BCE. The tribunes were elected officials who represented the interests of the plebeians and had the power to veto actions taken by magistrates that they deemed harmful to the plebeian class. The tribunes' ability to intervene in the legislative process was a significant power shift and represented a critical victory for the plebeians in their long battle for political representation. By the mid-5th century BCE, the Republic had begun to stabilize, but the balance of power between the patricians and plebeians remained fragile. Rome faced external threats, including invasions by the Gauls in 390 BCE, which tested the strength and unity of the Republic. The Roman response to these invasions demonstrated the resilience of the Republic and its ability to unite the various classes in times of crisis. The military was the backbone of Roman power, and it was composed largely of plebeians. However, it was also dominated by the patricians, who held the highest military offices and controlled the distribution of land and resources. The military's dual role, both as a tool for defending Rome and as a means of advancing political agendas, became one of the defining features of Roman society. The military was not just a force for conquest, it was also a vehicle for social mobility. Successful generals could use their military victories to gain political power, and many prominent political leaders, such as Gaius Marius and Pompey the Great, rose to prominence through their military achievements. As Rome expanded its territories and came into contact with other powerful civilizations, its political structure began to evolve. The Republic was increasingly influenced by the practices of other Mediterranean powers, particularly the Greek city-states. The influence of Greek culture, especially in the fields of philosophy, politics, and art, began to seep into Roman society, and this cultural exchange helped shape the intellectual and political life of the Republic. Despite its successes, the Roman Republic was not without its flaws. The continued dominance of the patricians, the persistent social inequality, and the concentration of power in the hands of a few wealthy families led to increasing discontent among the plebeians. By the 2nd century BCE, Rome's political system began to show signs of strain. The expansion of Rome's empire brought new wealth and resources, but it also created new divisions within Roman society. The rich grew richer, while the poor, especially the rural plebeians, faced increasing hardships. The growing inequality led to widespread unrest, and the Republic's institutions, designed to balance power, were increasingly unable to address the demands of the people. This period of instability marked the beginning of the end for the Roman Republic. The political chaos of the 1st century BCE, marked by the rise of populist leaders like the Gracchi brothers and the military ambitions of individuals like Julius Caesar, highlighted the deep divisions within Roman society. The Republic's failure to effectively manage its territorial expansion, social unrest, and political corruption would eventually lead to its downfall. Julius Caesar's rise to power, culminating in his appointment as dictator for life in 44 BCE, marked the final nail in the coffin for the Roman Republic. Despite his initial popularity and military successes, Caesar's accumulation of power was seen as a direct challenge to the Republic's traditional system of government. His assassination in 44 BCE by a group of senators, led by Brutus and Cassius, was an attempt to restore the power of the Senate, but it ultimately led to even greater instability. The political vacuum left by Caesar's death paved the way for the rise of his adopted heir, Octavian, later Augustus, who would eventually become the first Roman emperor. Augustus's reign marked the official end of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the Roman Empire. However, the legacy of the Republic lived on. The political structures and ideas developed during the Republic continued to influence Roman governance under the Empire. Concepts like the Senate, the consuls, and the notion of civic duty would persist, albeit in a different form, under imperial rule. The Roman Republic, despite its flaws and eventual collapse, set the stage for the rise of one of the greatest empires in history. Its ideals of civic participation, legal fairness, and political balance left a lasting impact on Western political thought. As the Roman Republic continued to evolve, the intricacies of its political system were tested repeatedly by internal and external pressures. One of the most notable challenges during the Republic's later years was the increasing involvement of the military in political affairs. Rome's expanding empire meant that military leaders who gained fame through their victories in distant lands also acquired significant political influence. Generals like Gaius Marius, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, Pompey the Great, and Julius Caesar were not just military figures, but became central to the Republic's political landscape. Their ability to command loyalty from legions gave them immense power, often undermining the authority of the Senate and other Republican institutions. Gaius Marius, for instance, introduced significant military reforms in the late 2nd century BCE, which made the Roman army more professional by recruiting the landless poor, or proletarii, into the legions. This shift had long-lasting implications, as soldiers now had more direct loyalty to their generals than to the state. This development changed the very nature of Roman politics, as military leaders increasingly used their power to secure political positions and manipulate the system for personal gain. The rise of populist leaders further eroded the republican system. The Gracchi brothers, Tiberius and Gaius, attempted to implement reforms aimed at redistributing land to the poor, but their actions angered the Senate, which viewed their reforms as a threat to its power. Their efforts, though well-intentioned, were met with violence, and both brothers were eventually murdered. The Gracchi's fate demonstrated the growing volatility of Roman politics and the increasing willingness of factions to use force rather than negotiation to achieve their goals. By the time of Julius Caesar's ascent to power, the Republic's once sturdy foundations were already crumbling. The rise of Caesar, who leveraged his military conquests to gain power, further exposed the vulnerabilities of a system that struggled to adapt to the pressures of imperial expansion. The Senate's inability to rein in Caesar's ambitions led to his appointment as dictator for life, an act that many saw as the final blow to the republican system. While Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE was meant to restore the Republic, it merely paved the way for the rise of his heir, Augustus, and the eventual establishment of the Roman Empire. Thus, the legacy of the Roman Republic, with its experiments in governance, participation, and balance of power, remains crucial in understanding the political evolution of the Western world. The eventual transition from republic to empire did not erase the republic's ideals, but transformed them into new forms. While the republic itself may have fallen, its impact on political theory, law, and governance endured throughout history. The Roman Republic's rise and fall serve as a testament to the complexities and challenges of maintaining a democratic system amidst the realities of military power, social inequality, and political ambition. The struggle of the orders, plebeians versus patricians. In the annals of Roman history, few conflicts were as consequential as the struggle of the orders, a protracted social, political, and economic conflict that took place over several centuries. At its heart, this struggle was a contest for power and rights between two distinct social classes of Rome: the plebeians, the commoners, and the patricians, the aristocracy. These two groups formed the backbone of Roman society, but their relationship was anything but harmonious. The patricians, who claimed descent from the original Roman families, held most of the political power and wealth, while the plebeians, despite being the majority, were largely excluded from political offices, legal rights, and economic privileges. The tension between these two groups was not simply a matter of class struggle, it was a battle for the very soul of the Roman Republic. The origins of the struggle of the orders can be traced to the early days of the Roman Republic, founded in 509 BCE, following the overthrow of the monarchy. In the fledgling republic, the patricians quickly consolidated power, establishing a government that largely favored their interests. The Senate, which held significant sway over Roman politics, was made up almost exclusively of patricians, and the consuls, the highest elected officials in the republic, were also from the elite class. For the plebeians, this meant that they had little say in the governance of the republic, despite constituting the majority of the population. The plebeians were primarily farmers, laborers, and soldiers, and yet they had no representation in the government. This disparity created resentment and a sense of injustice among the plebeians, who began to demand more rights and greater political representation. One of the first signs of the tension between the plebeians and the patricians came in 494 BCE, when the plebeians, frustrated with their lack of political power and economic hardship, staged a massive strike. This event, known as the secession of the plebs, saw the plebeians leave the city of Rome en masse, withdrawing to the Sacred Mount, just outside the city walls. This was a bold and unprecedented act of protest, and it effectively paralyzed the functioning of the city. With the plebeians absent, the patricians realized the critical role the common people played in Rome's economy and military. In response, the patricians were forced to make concessions. They agreed to establish the office of the tribune of the plebs, a new political position that would represent the plebeians' interest and protect them from the arbitrary power of the patricians. The tribunes were given the power to veto actions by the Senate and other magistrates, thus providing a measure of protection for the plebeians. Despite this victory, the plebeians still faced numerous challenges. The laws of Rome were written in a way that favored the patricians and kept the plebeians in a subordinate position. For example, the legal code, known as the 12 Tables, which was codified around 450 BCE, was an important step in creating a more transparent and consistent system of laws. However, the 12 Tables were still heavily biased in favor of the patricians, as they reinforced the privileges of the aristocracy and limited the rights of the plebeians. For instance, the plebeians had little recourse in legal disputes with patricians, and their debts could lead to enslavement. The struggle of the orders reached a critical point in the 4th century BCE. During this period, the plebeians began to gain more political power and slowly erode the privileges of the patricians. A key moment came in 367 BCE, when the Lex Licinius Sextia was passed. This law, which was introduced by the tribunes Gaius Licinius Stolo and Lucius Sextius Lateranus, enacted significant reforms. First, it limited the amount of land that any one individual could own, which primarily affected the wealthy patricians who controlled vast estates. More importantly, the law also allowed plebeians to be elected to the consulship, the highest office in the Roman Republic, a position that had been exclusively held by patricians up to that point. This was a watershed moment in the struggle of the orders, as it marked the first time that plebeians were allowed to hold the highest offices of power in Rome. The passage of the Lex Licinius Sextia did not immediately resolve the conflict, but it marked a turning point in the balance of power between the plebeians and the patricians. The plebeians' increasing political influence was further solidified with the passage of other laws, such as the Lex Hortensia in 287 BCE, which granted the decisions of the plebeian assembly, known as plebiscites, the force of law. This law gave the plebeians even more power in the legislative process, as it allowed them to pass laws without the approval of the Senate. While the patricians still maintained significant influence in the Senate, the plebeians now had a strong political platform from which they could challenge patrician power. By the end of the 3rd century BCE, the struggle of the orders had largely been resolved, with the plebeians achieving significant political and legal gains. However, the underlying social and economic inequalities between the two classes remained, and the patricians continued to hold a disproportionate share of wealth and land. The plebeians, though more politically empowered, still faced economic hardships, and their role in Roman society was often one of subordination, despite their increased political representation. The struggle of the orders was not just about the plebeians gaining political power. It was also about the transformation of the Roman Republic into a more inclusive system of government. The conflict between the plebeians and the patricians demonstrated the importance of political participation and the necessity of social and legal reforms in the face of inequality. Over time, the political and legal gains of the plebeians would be challenged by other social forces, such as the rise of military leaders like Gaius Marius and Julius Caesar, who would ultimately reshape Roman society in their own image. Nonetheless, the struggle of the orders remains one of the defining moments in the history of the Roman Republic, as it set the stage for the evolution of Roman political institutions and the eventual shift toward imperial rule. In the long run, the struggle of the orders was more than just a battle between two social classes. It was a contest over the very nature of Roman identity and governance. Through their struggle, the plebeians ensured that Rome would evolve into a republic that, at least in theory, offered greater participation and rights for its citizens, regardless of their social status. Though the patricians may have initially held the upper hand, the plebeians' persistence and unity eventually led to a more equitable society, one where their voices were heard and their rights acknowledged. The legacy of the struggle of the orders continues to resonate in modern political thought, reminding us of the power of collective action in the face of entrenched inequality. As the centuries progressed, the consequences of the struggle of the orders continued to shape the trajectory of the Roman Republic. The political landscape had undergone a transformation, but the struggles of the plebeians did not end with the legal victories they secured. Though the plebeians achieved many political rights, they still faced a series of challenges, both from the remaining aristocratic elites and from other emerging power structures in Rome. One of the ongoing issues for the plebeians was economic inequality. While political power was being redistributed, the wealth and land remained predominantly in the hands of the patricians and the growing class of wealthy plebeians. The Roman economy was largely based on agriculture, and many plebeians worked as tenant farmers or small landowners who struggled with debt, land loss, and limited access to resources. Large estates owned by patricians and wealthy plebeians often exploited slave labor, further exacerbating the economic divide. As a result, despite their political gains, many plebeians still faced severe economic hardships. Furthermore, as Rome expanded its influence and territory, new sources of wealth and power became concentrated in the hands of a few. Military generals, many of whom were plebeians, began to rise in prominence. These generals, such as Gaius Marius, Julius Caesar, and Pompey, gained power not through traditional political institutions, but through their control of armies. The ability of these military leaders to command loyal legions created a new dynamic in Roman politics, one that shifted power away from the Senate and traditional republican institutions. The rise of military generals and their influence over Roman politics set the stage for the eventual collapse of the Roman Republic and the transition to the Roman Empire. The struggle for power that had initially been between the plebeians and patricians eventually morphed into a battle for control between military leaders and the Senate. The tension between the old aristocratic order and the new populist military power would ultimately lead to civil war and the eventual emergence of the first emperor, Augustus, marking the end of the Republic. In many ways, the struggle of the orders represented the beginning of a larger transformation in Rome, one that reflected the fluidity of power, the social and economic tensions within society, and the changing nature of Roman identity. The legacies of both the plebeians and the patricians shaped Rome's evolution, influencing its institutions and contributing to the political shifts that would define the empire. Though the plebeians had achieved their initial goals, the struggle for political, economic, and social equality was far from over. The Roman Republic was a complex and dynamic society, and the evolution of its power structures would continue to influence the course of history. The rise of Roman military power, conquests, and expansion. In the early days of Rome, its military was a tool for survival, a force that was crucial for defending its small, burgeoning city-state. Yet, over the centuries, this same military would become the cornerstone of one of the most powerful empires the world has ever known. The rise of Roman military power is not merely the story of battles and conquests. It is a tale of strategic brilliance, disciplined soldiers, and a culture that revered warfare. From its humble beginnings, the Roman military would go on to conquer vast territories, shaping the future of Europe, Africa, and Asia, and leaving a legacy that would influence military tactics for centuries to come. At the dawn of the Roman Republic in the 6th century BCE, Rome was a small city-state surrounded by hostile neighbors. The Romans initially relied on their local forces to defend their territory. However, as their influence began to grow, so too did the necessity for a more structured and organized military. Rome's early military organization was rooted in its social structure. The Roman citizen soldiers were organized into legions, and every able-bodied male was expected to serve in the military. This gave rise to a strong sense of civic duty, with the military becoming an essential part of Roman identity. As the Roman Republic expanded, the need for a more sophisticated military system became apparent. By the 4th century BCE, Rome had developed a powerful and highly disciplined army. The Roman legion, made up of approximately 4,000 to 6,000 men, became the foundation of Roman military strength. The Roman soldiers, or legionaries, were trained to fight in close formation, using their shields and swords with precision. They were not only warriors, but also skilled engineers, capable of constructing fortifications, siege weapons, and roads to support their campaigns. Roman military training was rigorous, and soldiers were expected to maintain their discipline and readiness at all times. The expansion of Rome during the Republic was fueled by a series of military conquests, beginning with the conquest of neighboring Italian tribes. By the 3rd century BCE, Rome had emerged as the dominant power in Italy, having defeated rivals like the Samnites and the Gauls. But it was the Punic Wars fought between Rome and the Carthaginian Empire that truly marked the rise of Roman military power. The First Punic War, 264 to 241 BCE, saw Rome's first significant naval victory, and although Carthage was a more established power with a formidable navy, Rome's ability to adapt and learn quickly allowed them to prevail. The Romans also developed a reputation for persistence and tactical innovation, which would become hallmarks of their military strategy in future wars. The Second Punic War, 218 to 201 BCE, brought Rome face to face with one of its greatest military challenges, the Carthaginian general Hannibal. Hannibal's audacious crossing of the Alps with his army, including war elephants, remains one of the most remarkable feats in military history. His victories at battles such as Cannae, where he decisively destroyed a Roman army, shook Rome to its core, yet Rome's resilience was unmatched. Despite suffering heavy losses, the Romans adapted their tactics, using their superior manpower and resources to gradually wear down Hannibal's forces. By the end of the war, Rome had decisively defeated Carthage, securing its dominance over the Western Mediterranean. The Punic Wars were a turning point in the history of Rome. They demonstrated not only the power of Roman military organization, but also the strategic genius of Roman commanders. After the defeat of Carthage, Rome turned its attention to the Eastern Mediterranean. The conquest of Greece, Macedonia, and Asia Minor expanded Rome's influence into the heart of the Hellenistic world. Rome's victories over the Greek states, particularly at the Battle of Corinth in 146 BCE, solidified its control over Greece, making it a province of the Roman Republic. As Rome's military power grew, so did its influence over its vast empire. The Roman legions were now present in every corner of the Mediterranean world, from Spain to the Middle East. Roman soldiers were no longer simply defenders of their homeland. They were agents of imperialism, tasked with conquering and securing new territories. The Roman military was also instrumental in maintaining peace within the empire, ensuring that conquered peoples remained loyal and that trade routes remained open. The Roman system of roads and military posts allowed for rapid communication and troop movement, making it easier for the empire to respond to internal and external threats. By the 1st century BCE, Rome was a dominant superpower, but it was also facing internal turmoil. The expansion of the empire had led to a growing divide between the wealthy elite and the impoverished masses. The Roman military, which had been a force for unity and expansion, now became embroiled in the internal politics of the Republic. Generals such as Marius, Sulla, and Pompey began to wield more power than the Senate itself, and military commanders became the key players in Rome's political life. This period of instability culminated in the rise of Julius Caesar, whose military successes in Gaul made him one of the most powerful men in Rome. Caesar's military genius, especially during his campaigns in Gaul 58 to 50 BCE, demonstrated the full extent of Roman military power. His campaigns not only expanded Roman territory, but also solidified his personal control over the Roman army. Caesar's crossing of the Rubicon in 49 BCE marked the beginning of the end for the Roman Republic, as his forces marched on Rome itself, ultimately leading to his dictatorship. His reign, however, would be short-lived, as he was assassinated in 44 BCE by those who feared his growing power. Despite Caesar's death, the military continued to play a central role in Roman politics. His adopted heir, Augustus, would go on to become the first Roman emperor, but not before consolidating power through military victories, most notably in the Battle of Actium in 34 BCE. Under Augustus, the Roman military underwent significant reforms. The legions were professionalized, and soldiers were given land in return for their service. The Roman army became a standing force, and its soldiers were stationed in various provinces throughout the empire. Augustus also established a system of military auxiliaries made up of non-Roman soldiers who supported the legions. This allowed Rome to maintain a large and diverse military force that could be deployed wherever it was needed. The Roman military was not only a tool of conquest, but also a force for Romanization, spreading Roman culture and values throughout the empire. The Pax Romana, the period of relative peace that followed Augustus's reign, was a testament to the effectiveness of the Roman military. Under the emperors, the legions maintained control over an empire that stretched from Britain to the Persian Empire. The military ensured that the borders were secure, and it was instrumental in suppressing uprisings and revolts within the empire. Despite the peace, Rome was always prepared for war, and the Roman legions remained a formidable force capable of defending the empire's vast borders from invaders such as the Germanic tribes, the Parthians, and the Huns. However, the Roman military was not invincible. Over time, the empire's vast size and the challenges of maintaining control over such a large territory began to take their toll. The military was stretched thin, and the Roman economy began to suffer. The legions, once the backbone of the empire, began to lose their discipline, and the quality of Roman soldiers declined. The empire was also increasingly dependent on mercenaries, who lacked the loyalty and dedication of Roman soldiers. The decline of the Roman military was one of the factors that contributed to the eventual fall of the Western Roman Empire in 4476 CE. Despite the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the legacy of Roman military power lived on. The tactics, organization, and discipline of the Roman legions continued to influence military forces throughout history. Roman military innovations, such as the use of siege engines, the construction of military roads, and the establishment of military camps, left an indelible mark on warfare. The Roman military system was the model for later empires, from the Byzantine Empire to the Holy Roman Empire, and its influence can still be seen in modern military strategy. The rise of Roman military power was not simply the result of battlefield victories, but of a comprehensive approach to warfare, leadership, and organization. It was a combination of strategic brilliance, military innovation, and an unwavering commitment to discipline that allowed Rome to rise from a small city-state to a global empire. The Roman military was not just a force for conquest. It was a symbol of Roman strength and unity, and it played a pivotal role in shaping the world as we know it today. The Punic Wars, Rome's battle with Carthage. The Punic Wars stand as one of the most defining periods in the history of ancient Rome, marked by a fierce struggle for supremacy between Rome and Carthage. These wars, spanning from 264 BCE to 146 BCE, would ultimately shape the trajectory of the Mediterranean world, laying the foundation for Rome's rise to dominance. The conflict was not merely a series of military engagements. It was a clash of cultures, strategies, and ideologies, with both sides fighting for control over the rich resources of the Western Mediterranean. The origins of the Punic Wars trace back to the competition for influence and trade dominance. Carthage, a wealthy Phoenician city-state located in modern-day Tunisia, had established itself as a powerful naval force, dominating trade routes across the Mediterranean. On the other hand, Rome, initially a small city-state, had rapidly grown in influence and territorial control, primarily through its military prowess. As Rome expanded its power, it began to encroach on territories that Carthage had long considered its own. This inevitable clash led to the outbreak of the First Punic War in 264 BCE, setting the stage for one of history's most brutal rivalries. At the onset of the First Punic War, neither Rome nor Carthage could have predicted the scale and intensity of the conflict that would follow. The war began over control of Sicily, a strategically important island at the crossroads of major trade routes. Sicily had long been a target for both powers, with the city of Messana serving as a flashpoint. When the Mamertines, a group of mercenaries, called for Roman assistance against Carthaginian forces, Rome saw an opportunity to challenge Carthage's influence in the region. The Romans, despite having limited naval experience, quickly adapted, building a fleet to rival Carthage's renowned navy. The war that followed would be largely naval, with both sides engaging in a series of bloody and costly battles. The Romans, traditionally land-based fighters, were forced to innovate and adapt to naval warfare. One of the most significant Roman contributions to naval tactics was the invention of the corvus, a boarding device that allowed Roman soldiers to board enemy ships and turn naval engagements into hand-to-hand combat, an area where they excelled. Despite Carthage's superior fleet and experienced sailors, the Romans' determination and strategic ingenuity slowly began to turn the tide in their favor. Several major naval battles, including the Battle of Mylae in 260 BCE and the Battle of Ecnomus in 256 BCE, showcased Rome's growing prowess in naval warfare. Rome's victory at the Battle of Agate's Islands in 241 BCE ultimately forced Carthage to sue for peace, ending the First Punic War. However, the peace that followed the First Punic War was far from stable. Carthage, despite its defeat, was not content to rest on its laurels. The Carthaginian general Hamilcar Barca, father of the famous Hannibal, began rebuilding Carthage's power by focusing on Spain, where vast wealth and resources lay untapped. The Second Punic conflict, which would be the most famous and intense of the three wars, erupted in 218 BCE. The Carthaginians, now led by Hannibal Barca, sought revenge against Rome and aimed to break its dominance in the Western Mediterranean once and for all. Hannibal's campaign in the Second Punic War would go down in history as one of the most brilliant military endeavors ever conceived. His audacious crossing of the Alps in 218 BCE with a sizable army and war elephants remains one of the most daring feats in military history. This bold move allowed Hannibal to bring the war directly to Roman soil, catching Rome off guard and forcing the Republic to defend itself on its own territory. The Carthaginian general won a series of stunning victories, including the Battle of Trebia, the Battle of Lake Trasimene, and the infamous Battle of Cannae in 216 BCE. At Cannae, Hannibal inflicted one of the worst defeats in Roman military history, encircling and annihilating a Roman army nearly twice his size. Despite these stunning victories, Hannibal faced significant challenges in exploiting his successes. The Roman Senate, known for its resilience and determination, refused to yield. Rather than fighting Hannibal directly, Rome adopted a strategy of attrition, avoiding major battles and instead targeting Carthaginian supply lines and allies. The Roman general Fabius Maximus, dubbed the Delayer, was instrumental in this strategy, leading to a prolonged war of survival for both sides. Rome's refusal to accept defeat, combined with its ability to raise new armies, allowed it to eventually gain the upper hand. The turning point in the Second Punic War came in 22 BCE, when the Roman general Scipio Africanus defeated Hannibal at the Battle of Zama, located in modern-day Tunisia. Scipio's victory was due in large part to his ability to neutralize Hannibal's war elephants and to his innovative tactics, which outmaneuvered the Carthaginian forces. The defeat at Zama marked the end of the Second Punic War, with Carthage forced to sign a peace treaty that stripped it of its empire and left it significantly weakened. Rome emerged from the war as the dominant power in the Mediterranean, but the scars of the conflict would remain for years to come. After the Second Punic War, Carthage was left broken and humiliated. For a time, the city-state was forbidden from waging war without Rome's permission, and its territory was reduced. Yet, the desire for revenge and the will to restore Carthage's former glory did not dissipate. By the early 2nd century BCE, Rome, emboldened by its victory, began to grow wary of Carthage's potential resurgence. The Senate, led by the influential Cato the Elder, became increasingly convinced that Carthage's mere existence posed a threat to Rome's dominance. Cato's famous cry, "Carthago delenda est," Carthage must be destroyed, echoed throughout Roman political discourse. In 149 BCE, the Third Punic War broke out, a conflict that would ultimately result in the complete annihilation of Carthage. Unlike the previous wars, the Third Punic War was marked by Rome's decision to destroy Carthage utterly. After a prolonged siege, the Romans breached the city's walls and, in 146 BCE, sacked Carthage. The Carthaginian people were either killed or sold into slavery, and the city was systematically destroyed, its buildings razed to the ground. The land around Carthage was then cursed, and the once great city was erased from the map. The destruction of Carthage marked the end of the Punic Wars and solidified Rome's unchallenged supremacy in the Mediterranean. The Punic Wars were transformative not only for Rome, but for the entire ancient world. These wars revealed the immense resilience and adaptability of Rome, a city-state that, through sheer determination and strategic ingenuity, overcame a series of catastrophic challenges to emerge as the dominant power in the Mediterranean. The wars also had profound consequences for Carthage, which was destroyed, leaving a power vacuum that Rome would swiftly fill. In the aftermath of the Punic Wars, Rome would continue to expand, eventually becoming an empire that would rule the known world for centuries to come. The legacy of the Punic Wars extends beyond their immediate military and political outcomes. These conflicts shaped Roman identity, instilling a sense of unyielding resolve and a belief in the superiority of Roman civilization. The wars also had a lasting impact on Roman military strategy and tactics, influencing future generations of generals and soldiers. In many ways, the Punic Wars set the stage for the rise of Roman imperialism, which would ultimately shape the destiny of the ancient world. The echoes of the Punic Wars reverberated through history as the lessons learned in the struggle with Carthage would continue to influence Rome's path as it transitioned from republic to empire, altering the course of Western civilization for millennia. The aftermath of the Punic Wars also brought significant social and economic changes within Rome. The destruction of Carthage opened up vast new territories for Roman exploitation, particularly in the form of land acquisitions and the expansion of Roman trade routes. This allowed Rome to grow its economy as well as solidify its grip on key Mediterranean regions, including North Africa, Spain,